wrong noodles. Motherfucker. What? Motherfucker. You fucking asshole. Who the fuck do you think you are? I come in here. You don't know me. You don't know who I am, what my life is. If you have the balls, the decency to ask me a question about my life.
That's me every time I pick up my SSRI from the pharmacy.
Oh, Jesus. That's good. That's a good clip from a crazy movie that I'm so excited to talk about today. And like, what episode are we on here? We're on episode 4 of our camp cinema season on Film Trace.
Heck yeah.
To Wong Foo, Thanks for Everything, Julie Newmar from 1995 is the first movie we're going to talk about. Mm-hmm. And then, of course, Magnolia from 1999, which might be a little bit of a controversial pick for the idea of camp.
Not a typically known campy film.
It is not, but we will dive into that.
I'm sure Dan has a thesis, as I'm sure I do too.
I do, of course. I always have a thesis. Special guest, welcoming back Natasha, a writer at Cultured Vultures. Natasha, say hello and let us know what you've been up to. What have you written recently?
Hello, hi everyone. It's good to be back. I'm glad to be invited back. It's always nice. What's new? Recently, I think, I don't know if you guys realized, but Rotten Tomatoes kind of changed their user interface.
Right.
Like they kind of redesigned it and something like that. And so all the critics have kind of like come together and we've been, writing them and stuff because I don't know if you realize, but they kind of put the critic reviews at the very bottom and they kind of buried it in the site. So you can't even see it. So even when you Google, right, the percentage that shows up is actually the audience percentage. Really? So we don't know why, like there was all these changes, but so that's I guess that crusade, I guess, is what I've been busy with. I just wrote a review for Amazon Prime's The Idea of You, starring Anne Hathaway and Nicholas Galitzine, I think that's his name. Yeah, I don't know. I'm sure you guys would have heard some buzz, right, about that film.
Yeah, a little bit. Yeah,
it's like the Age Camp Robas.
Yeah. What did you think of it?
I think Anne Hathaway just makes everything better, and she looks like amazing. I want her wardrobe. So I think I don't know. I feel like if the actors are kind of decent in a rom-com, it can kind of work. There were elements that I didn't really think were very good about the film. It felt a bit rushed, but I think overall it's not a bad way, I guess, to spend a few hours. Yeah. So
that sounds like a streaming movie. Right.
It is. I think it's hard to expect a lot from a streaming rom-com these days. I think I just expect entertainment, and I think I'm good with that. Yeah.
Yeah, that sounds about right.
Yeah, that's what I've been doing, yeah.
I saw your review for Challengers. Did you like that?
Did you I tried to have a lot of innuendo in my review.
Yeah, I really want to see that, and your review makes me want to see it even more.
Oh my god!
I'm excited for that one.
It's. I think. I don't know. I feel that sometimes I think you guys probably can relate, but we see so many films across the year, and after a while, right, it becomes a bit like numbing because it's good, maybe it's bad, but you kind of miss that feeling of watching like a really good movie, the kind of movie that makes you like feel something. So I think I've had I think this past few months, the 5 months haven't been great for 2024. I mean, I guess there was Dune, the Fall Guys, campy entertainment. But I mean, Challenges, I think, was the first movie I think that made me feel like, wow. Yeah, I was just really, really invested. And I think Lucas on a roll, I feel like his last 3 films have been quite decent, Bones and All was really good as well. So yeah, I think it's a fantastic movie to watch in a cinema. So I think that's what I really enjoyed about Challenger.
Awesome. Yeah, I can't wait to see it.
Me
Yeah.
too.
Don't bring your family.
Yeah, I kind of knowing Luca.
All right.
Yeah, knowing Luca, he's got a lot to say, and it's always not the most family friendly stuff.
My kids always are curious what movies I'm podcasting about, so I don't let them watch it, but I tell them, and I told them when we covered Bones et al, and they're like, that's a movie? That's not okay.
he's out there, but he's always got something to say. Speaking of which, let's dive in to To Wong Foo. Thanks for Everything, Julie Newmar from 1995, starring Wesley Snipes, Patrick Swayze, John Leguizamo. First of all, what we usually like to do is kind of maybe talk about whether we've seen the movie before, if we have a history with it. So I can start into that. I had never seen this before, and I just watched it for the first time last night. And I remember it coming out as like a kid. I was about 13 when it came out. I remember the buzz around it. I remember kind of, being pretty confused by the whole thing when I was younger. But yeah, and I had never sort of, I had heard of Priscilla before, which, came out, I think a year before this. Mm-hmm. I'd never seen that either. But yeah, I was excited to sort of actually like sit down and watch this for the first time. I don't know about Chris and Natasha. What had you guys seen this before?
Go ahead, Natasha.
Yeah, okay. So I think I've seen it before, like when I was younger, but because when I was rewatching it, I recognize some parts of the movie, but I think, when you're young, it's just one of those films that you kind of watch on cable and you just kind of sit there and you watch it and you don't really know what you were watching. You're just like, oh, it's entertaining. I'll just sit here and watch this,
Totally.
Because I distinctly remember Patrick Swayze, dressed as a woman and things like that. So I can remember parts of the film. So I was like, oh yeah, this is familiar. But I haven't watched it like as an adult until now. Yeah.
Yeah,
Chris, what about you?
Right. I have a vivid memory of the trailer from when I was younger. And the way that they promoted this film, and I checked it to make sure my memory was correct, is like they used clips of Roadhouse in the trailer to be like,
really,
like Patrick Swayze as you've never seen him before, and then hard, smash cut to Swayze in drag, and I think Wesley Snipes maybe like Passenger 57 or something. They did something similar, right?
Yeah.
Totally.
So that was. I mean, that's the only memory I have of this film. I think, like we will end up talking about when we get to the Rocky Horror Picture Show episode. Dan and I grew up pretty sheltered in suburban Midwest town, so it was like that. We saw that like as a part of like the pop culture ether, and but we didn't really engage with it at all, and it kind of felt kind of like out of reach, even though we very probably easily could have. Like, this was a pretty wide released film in terms of like drag representation or like gender non-conforming representation in the 90s. But no, I never grabbed it off the Blockbuster video shelf. I watched it for the first time a couple nights ago and was pleasantly surprised. It's a fun movie, not without its problems, as any 90s film starring cis straight people as queer people. But I think that it was, we also, my corollary for this is like my wife was having fond memories for some reason of Third Rock from the Sun, the NBC sitcom from the 90s. And she's like, oh, maybe the kids will like that. Let's throw that on. And like, we watched the pilot and it's like a million times more problematic than To Wong Foo, Thanks for Everything, Julie Newmar. It's like,
wow.
it holds up like worse than Alf, which we watched the pilot of afterwards, the 80s sitcom about the alien coming to Earth. But this was like a breath of fresh air in many ways, where I was really, and I'm interested to hear your guys' thoughts, because it felt like I was just waiting for it to like go off the deep end, as perhaps sometimes campy films do. But this is, I think we're, based on our research and our picks, we were pretty right on. And this is like a really solid example of deliberate camp, as Susan Sontag described in her original essay. What do you guys think?
Yeah. I mean, I think you bring up a really good point about, like, and this film specifically is, I think, especially a minefield, at least today in like American culture and politics, just because of what's been happening to the queer community here in the United States and the trans community, where there's a lot of outward, like, sort of pressure and oppression and sometimes violence against them. Going back and looking at a film from 1995 about, members of that, who would say they were members of that community, it feels tough, right? Because you're like, there's no way that this movie from the 90s is going to say anything that's not going to be like totally offensive. But, I'll have to say, I didn't really find, to kind of like a similar point to you, Chris, I didn't really find a lot of it to be as like out of time or out of place. Like it felt pretty like open and fair to the people that they're representing in the film. And that was very surprising to me, because I had just assumed that if it's a movie about, a group of cross-dressing men in the 90s made by a major Hollywood studio, that it would be like simplistic and like really, really offensive. But it just, I don't know. From my perspective and my experience, it doesn't seem that way at all. It actually seemed kind of open and like supportive and kind of maybe even illuminating a little bit. But that's from my perspective. I don't know, Natasha, what you thought. Did you have any thoughts about that and kind of, how it represented that community, either well or not well?
I think I agree with the both of you. I don't think I found anything particularly offensive. I did wonder why the men were always in drag, because I
Yeah.
think I was online and then I was reading some stuff about it, and I think usually drag queens do come out of drag, right?
Yes.
So because I mean they are gay men, right? So they do spend time, I think, as men. So I wasn't sure if they were drag queens, or were they transgender, because they were always performing as women, right? So I wasn't really
Yeah.
Even in
clear on
private,
that, I
right?
guess. Yeah, so that I found to be a bit unclear, because I think at one point I can't remember who, someone actually gives a definition, right, of
Yeah.
all the labels, what makes a transsexual, what makes a transgender, right? And then I think there's a joke about Chi being a little boy, like a boy in
Yeah.
a Latin boy in
In
a
a
dress, right?
dress.
Something like that, right? So I think that was the confusing part, I guess. But I guess it's kind of small, like it doesn't really matter, I guess, in the grand scheme of things. I think because I think the actors did a really good job of making the characters, I think, feel three-dimensional, despite I think the campiness of the film. Like
Yeah.
I think they were more than just you could feel, I guess, the development of their characters, and they weren't just there to kind of just be funny and comedic or be the butt of the joke. I thought John Leguizamo as Chi was really, really good. I think his performance
Yeah.
it felt very authentic and lived in. So I
Mhm.
think that the actor's commitment to the parts and to the role, and I think the whole like road trip aspect of it, that the whole concept, I think, of them being stranded in like middle America is
Yeah.
it provides a lot of opportunity, I think, for very interesting set pieces. So yeah, I think overall I really enjoyed it. I thought the film's title was kind of a mouthful. I was like,
Oh
Yeah.
yeah.
oh, it's a bit much to say, but yeah, I understand like why the title is such, and yeah, I think relatively enjoyable film.
Yeah. It's funny you mentioned the
Mm.
title, because I think I found somewhere that the advertising people who were looking at the movie wanted to call it Ladies Night or She's a Lady, but they somehow stuck with the original title, which, you know, very long, but you're not going to forget it, right? One of those
Yeah.
things.
Yeah. It's memorable,
I
definitely.
I was trying to find online like who is Wong Foo, because obviously they don't know in the film, and yet we get a cameo from Julie Newmar at the end, and we still we're left unknown, and it seems to be still kind of like a random piece of the lore that sticks with the film today. And I think that's kind of part of it, right? Is that there is this kind of whether intentional or not, and I think it might be where it's like you kind of have to just accept it. It kind of felt appropriate, especially towards the end of the film when it's revealed that Stockard Channing's character has known all along, right? That these are men in drag that have come to their town, where it's like some things you don't have to say, you don't have to explain, because if the they're people that are treating each other well, and they're welcoming and inviting and helpful and complicated, just like every human is. So what at some point that there's no reason to ask questions other than for your own curiosity. And that was a thing that kind of surprised me about the film, because when it became clear that it was going to be very 90s in its how it addressed gender, and it's a straight female director, a gay male writer. Fun fact: we're going to cover Xanadu when we get to the 80s, Dan, your pick. And the writer
so excited
of this film, Douglas Carter Bean, is the guy that adapted Xanadu for Broadway.
Love it.
So it seems like it has this baked in kind of sense of not only camp, but also just like the joys of excess. And so I was a little concerned once they got to Snydersville in the film, especially because at that point we were introduced to Chris Penn's character, which we'll have to address at some point. But I was like, oh, okay, so it's actually not really going to be the drag queen representation that's going to be problematic. It's going to be like the small town redneck representation that's going to be problematic. But I mean, other than the abusive mechanic, who's still like ordered the part for them and like helped them out. It was really awesome. I think my favorite scene in the movie is actually like when Wesley Snipes' character approaches the mute old woman.
Yes,
and she starts talking in response to her name dropping Dorothy Dandridge and Lena Horne, and then it becomes clear that like I don't know, that's just like one of those beautiful moments. Like Carter Bean is also a playwright, so he knows how to get that like three-dimensionality out of even just like a simple scene like that, where she could have easily been played for laughs as just like I'm thinking like you remember the Farrelly Brothers movie Kingpin from around the same era, right? Where they just like the Amish people were the butt of a joke, and here they're not. They're not Amish, but they're like supposed to be hillbilly types, and they're really all like lived in, and that I think that helps with a lot of the other kind of aspects of the film that maybe are a little bit dated. But there's a reason why this movie is still very much beloved. And I think that even with regard to like the uncertain kind of identification for these three main characters regarding, cross-dressing is something that's typically seen in private. It's also kind of an antiquated term, but drag queen is very much like when you're going to perform. And in that other film that you mentioned that came around the same time, Dan, Adventures of Priscilla, Queen of the Desert, like that movie had both transgender characters and more traditional definition of drag queen characters where they're out of drag. And here it definitely it almost becomes it becomes a feature rather than a side effect, that like these characters don't neatly fit in, right? Because that's the point of the film in many ways, is that whether it's non-conforming with regard to sexual orientation or gender identity or some combination of the two, we're still kind of like not there's really no reason to ask any questions because they're good people and like they make poor decisions, like probably the line that aged the worst, but they still try to deal with it in kind of a forgiving way. Is like, you think that Patrick Swayze is this perfect person with regard to like how much he helps out those around him, and then it turns out that like he gets called out as a white savior, and then he's got like these racial epithets that he's been holding in his head the whole time.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, that is a minefield, but it's a minefield that is somehow like danced elegantly within the script and the performances, because it does like get called out as the film concludes, and maybe overly warm and fuzzy way. I don't know. Is that how people?
It's very Hollywood at the end, right?
Yeah.
It's very like it's from a major studio. This movie got made because someone at Steven Spielberg's company found the script, was an advocate, sent it to Spielberg. Spielberg loved it.
Yeah.
And then brought in Robin Williams and was basically like, hey, is this good? Is this funny? Am I like, I'm not missing something? And Robin Williams was like, make this movie. And it's like,
it's funny
kind of
because
crazy.
he said that.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think I read that same article. That article, I think by Mitch Conn, right? It's really good. And yeah. And I think it's really funny that Robin Williams said that he can't do any of the main characters because he was too hairy. So he was like, I'm gonna like, I'll do a cameo. I'm too hairy for to take on one of the roles. Yeah.
And the reason I bring that up is because, and Natasha, I would love to get your take with how it is where you're at, just culturally. But here in America, this movie came out in like the mid 90s. And, as a young person then, it felt like in terms of representation with gender and sexuality, things were getting a lot better pretty quickly back then. And then, our situation here in the United States has changed pretty dramatically in the last, let's say, 8 years. It is, again, super surprising to see a movie like this made by a major studio with Steven Spielberg involved and Robin Williams. And you have two of the biggest action stars of the day, Wesley Snipes and Patrick Swayze, playing the leads here. It is something that I just, and Chris, maybe correct me if I'm wrong here, you don't think so, would never happen today in the United States. It just would not. The culture here has become very, very conservative, at least part of it. And I wonder, Natasha, like what, do you feel like this movie, to us, it feels kind of like a weird time capsule to a different moment in time that almost felt better culturally. I don't know how you feel about that and kind of your situation.
I think I was actually reading about this. I think they talked about how films like Priscilla, and I think Philadelphia, I think they were all like kind of made around the same time, and a lot of people kind of said that it was like they were making these films, I think, in part to kind of bring representation to the LGBTQ community, and because I think of the AIDS crisis as well. So I think they really, I think, wanted people to be able to identify with this group of people and have empathy. So I think that's why a lot of actors, I think, were also on board, right? Because I think many of their peers or people that they know were losing their lives to AIDS, right? And I think at that point, not many people were out, so sometimes you don't even kind of know that that they're gay or their sexual orientation or anything like that until like they've passed on from AIDS. So it was actually like a really so I think a lot of this like progression was also in response to what was happening at that point. And I do think that maybe, I don't know, maybe 9/11 kind of reset a lot of this progress and made people more insular, I think, again, and then we became culturally, I guess, more conservative in that sense. Yeah, Singapore has always been conservative, so
Yeah. Yeah.
so I wouldn't have been able to see this movie in theaters. That's why I think I saw it on HBO or some cable channel, so some late night kind of TV. So we wouldn't get it at that point in the cinema. Yeah, but so it's a weird kind of thing, because for a lot of, I think, the 90s were quite progressive in a lot of ways, and then it seemed kind of ironic that we kind of regressed after that in terms of like film, and I think in terms of culture and people. So yeah, I think it's a very important film. I think even until now, I think recently, I think John Leguizamo talks about how, many people reached out to him and said that, they could come out to their families. They felt, safe to do that, and encouraged, I think, to do that because of his character, right? And they saw so much
Yeah.
of themselves in Chi Chi. So I don't know. I mean, I think for me as well, because I'm Indian, right? I'm a an
Yeah.
Indian girl, and then you don't, like, when I was growing up, I don't really see like many people who look like me in
Yeah.
cinema. So I think when you see like a film, like when I went to watch like Bandit, like Beckham, and that
Yeah.
was the first time, you kind of see like a girl that looks like you, and then um yeah, just being represented, on the big screen like that. So I think it's actually, yeah, very landmark kind of moment. And I guess that's why the film is still really like well regarded, like all these years later. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think that, like, it seems like such a simple thing that still, with this regression, Hollywood clearly knows by now, but now starts ignoring. So it almost feels like worse. I know I don't mean to bring up Alf again in an episode about
Two Alf
Wong
references.
Foo, but like, but I was just so amazed that like this 80s sitcom was so like warm-hearted when I watched it with my kids after the immense failure of Third Rock from the Sun, and it does feel like there's been this kind of and this is, I think, not just tangentially but maybe integrally related to this concept of camp when it comes to like irony and being cynical. And I think that so much of the time we assume that camp is like baked into these kinds of more bitter kind of cinematic treats, so to speak. But it really isn't. I felt like that when I watched Rocky Horror. I felt like that when I watched um, uh, the Sugar and Spice, where you there's something to be said for this kind of like sincerity that comes from like representation, just in a very matter of fact, like, these are not perfect people, but these are good people. And we were so obsessed for so many years, and still are to such degree. I'm like trying to think, going back to the question about like what would it look like today if they tried this, and
Be a disaster.
Dwayne the Rock Johnson be like doing his eyebrow thing because when he looks at himself in the mirror in a dress or something, where it's just like
Yeah.
I don't, yeah, I think that maybe it could be made, but it would be even worse than like
It would be
what it was
way
like in the
worse.
80s. Like,
Yeah, that's the first thought when you
Yeah.
said that. I was like, it would be like the 1980s, and it would be like super, super aggressive. And it's just like, I don't know. It's shocking how much things can change in a country or a culture, and maybe worldwide. I mean, it's like, and this is like a really good, not to get into like, politics or theory or stuff like that, but I'm going to anyways.
yeah, Reaganomics, you go for it, Dan.
Yeah. But it's like, you think about during this timeline or this time period, the idea of postmodernism, this concept of like end of history, was like a big, big idea. And like what was underpinning that concept was that like history is always progressing, we're always moving forward, and eventually get to a point where it's like it's at an end point or it's a stopping point. And like we've kind of, we've all the oppressive people have been, unoppressed, and people are open, and things are not going to go backwards. But that is so wrong. And like things can go backwards very quickly. And it's like, this is a perfect movie where like this movie despite us talking about it pretty positively, I don't know that it's that positively regarded amongst like everybody. Number one,
Still pretty niche, yeah.
Yeah, and with that, but it's also sort of, I think even among the queer community, there's a lot of confusion and friction with this film because the representation is not perfect, and and Natasha pointed it out, and it's been pointed out by people that are drag queens that like, yeah, I'm not always in drag, right? Like that's not how it works. That being said, I think Chris, to your point, the thing that was really revealing to me about this movie was that it had this saccharine Hollywood core to it in the middle, where it was basically like, these people are good people, they want to help other people, and that's a good thing. That in itself is revolutionary, it feels like.
I know. It's so foreign today.
So foreign. Because like, I don't know what happened. Like, we all kind of got really cynical, or the internet, I don't know, whatever you want to, 9/11, anything it could possibly be. The concept of just people being decent to each other.
I mean, Donald Trump. We have not said the words Donald Trump.
Donald Trump, right. In the United States, that's not a thing anymore. It's just not. And like mixing that decency with sort of queer representation is actually, to me, is a very powerful thing. And that's why I really not only enjoy the movie, but think that there's actually a pretty strong political statement in it that feels relevant today.
I think, I don't know, I think that Chris kind of nailed it on the head with the use of the word sincerity. I think that's what kind of bugs me about modern filmmaking, is that sometimes I feel that the film feels very much like a product, that everything feels very curated, and even the characters are like curated, or molded to kind of fit, to represent something, or to so I feel like, I don't know, like I feel what the 90s had, even, I mean, some films suck. I mean, the 90s were not perfect in terms of film, but I think what it did well is that I think the characters always kind of felt more human. Yeah, like the humanity, I think, was always very front and center. And I think that's why I still really enjoy kind of watching 90s movies. I don't know. I think that's what my gripe is, I think, when I kind of watch modern film. Like, I just feel like everything is so airbrushed that it doesn't feel sincere, I guess.
Yeah.
I don't know. I don't know what you guys
I'm noticing
think.
now that last time we had you on the show, Natasha, you also opted to be on the 90s episode when we talked about The Crying Game, which coincidentally also has like some very interesting representations of gender. I think that, I mean, okay, so maybe this is where we have to do a hard pivot into Magnolia, because coming out in 99, it almost feels like kind of, in my opinion, like kind of a swan song of the 90s, where you have absurd amounts of sincerity, and yet also kind of this like tinge of cynicality that is like ushering in the era of the new millennium. It's a arguably a minefield in many other ways than To Wong Foo. So without further ado, should we get into that? Like, I'm very curious, Natasha, what your experience with P.T. Anderson's Magnolia is.
Okay, so when I was younger, I thought it was an ice cream. Like, I thought it was a movie about ice cream or something. So like, do you guys have that ice cream called Magnolia ice cream?
I think I've heard of it, but I don't think we have it. Yeah.
So I was like,
okay, yeah.
For some reason, I always confuse this movie with Vanilla Sky.
Sure. Thank you. We just covered that movie.
Yeah. So I think because I think this was the point in Tom Cruise's career where he was kind of doing he wasn't like completely the action man, like the man of action. Like he was still
Mhm.
kind of doing different kind of films. But I was always put off by the runtime because Magnolia is like 3 hours. So I was like, oh, do I really want to like, spend 3 hours watching movies? So I've always been like put off because of it. So I never like watched it until I had to for the podcast.
No,
Which makes it
interesting.
sound bad.
No,
But,
that's not bad at
no.
all. No.
We need that fresh
Yeah.
perspective.
I mean, I also have a fresh
Yeah.
perspective because I didn't see this movie. We have a good friend, Molly, who's been on the show many times, and we talk about Paul Thomas Anderson all the time for some reason. I don't know why. It always comes up. And we had a very long conversation about Phantom Thread for like a year. It felt like we were talking about that movie. And I had never seen this, and I came to visit Molly in Chicago, and she's like, let's just sit down and watch this together. We should do like a movie night together. So we sat down and watched it. And
So, like, what year is this?
this is like last year.
Oh my
First time
god!
I've ever seen it. First time
Oh
I've
my
ever
God.
seen it. I've owned the DVD. I had the DVD somewhere, and I never watched it because it is. I think we have to like
3 hours.
we have to state this out
3 hours
loud that like Magnolia is one of those films that if you're our age and we're like in our me and Chris are in our early 40s as dudes that were into like movies, Magnolia was like this
Holy
big
grail.
thing, like high school, college years and early adulthood of like the idea of like a really, really good movie. And like, this is art film. This is like someone being a filmmaker being confident, being experimental and saying something interesting. And it really, this came after Boogie Nights, really made PTA like one of the guys, like a Christopher Nolan, like a David Fincher. It put him at that level or echelon. And I think for me, seeing it for the first time, I have all this baggage with like the last, 26 years, whatever it is, 25 years. That like, wow. Yeah. It did not land the way that I thought it was going to. I don't know, Chris. Why don't you speak to it, Chris? Because I think you have probably the longest history.
I've been holding back. You had the DVD, but I had the double VHS.
I forgot it was a double two videos.
Yeah. Okay, so I saw this movie in the theaters, and I had not seen Boogie Nights yet at the time, but I was very aware of like Paul Thomas Anderson's kind of rising celebrity, especially with, like you kind of mentioned, this film bro collective that had kind of sprung up in the alt I'm doing air quotes right now, alt scene of the late 90s. And so it seemed like the promotion and marketing for the film was really kind of oblique and suggestive, but not always like trying to not show too much of its cards. And so, yeah, it was pretty much just like, this is the guy that made Boogie Nights, and he's the new darling in Hollywood. And also it's Tom Cruise playing this insane role and a cast of, over a dozen characters, which was its own kind of thing at the time, like kind of the trail end of the Quentin Tarantino hyperlink cinema effect, right? Before it kind of became just another way to tell a story in the 2000s with like Babel and the other movies from that kind of era. So I was all in. I don't know. Did you guys know the ending, having just watched it in the past year or past few weeks?
Natasha, did you know the ending? I didn't know the ending.
You mean the biblical ending of frogs?
Yeah, the frogs.
No, I didn't know. It caught me by surprise.
Didn't?
I was like,
Really?
what the hell?
Oh my god!
I was like, what?
Yeah.
And that was shocking. I was like, what the hell is happening? Yeah. So was, yeah.
So you have to understand that, okay, I don't know how, and I've read online about people still being surprised by this, which is shocking to me, but I mean, that's incredible. That's the way to see the movie, of course. But like in the theater, and it was packed. It was, I don't know why it was packed in suburban Midwest. I think it was at like the Value Theater too, like the second run.
Okay. That's
I
interesting that it was crowded.
Yeah, it was super. Like, maybe it was like sometimes they had like dollar nights. So
like Tuesday or something.
Yeah, like $1 Tuesday, $2 Tuesdays. Anyways, I was with like a really like kind of mixed group of high school friends, and including a few of which were just like like kind of your stereotypical jocks.
Yeah.
And I don't know how exactly this motley crew got together to go watch Magnolia on a Tuesday night or whatever. But having that ending happen and like feel the reaction from everyone around me, including this mixed group of friends, was, I think, vital. It was integral to my like experience and lifelong love of this film. And I know I can like kind of take a step back, or I can attempt to, and see that as maybe part of like what makes both cinema so personal as well as so divisive, especially when it goes big like this. But it felt very much like it wanted you, especially as a wide release film, to like, it wants you to hate the ending. It wants you to like just be like, what the hell? He didn't know how to end it, so he just pulled something out of the Bible, and
which he claims to say he didn't know that was in the Bible.
Yeah, I read that as well. Like,
he's
he added all the Exodus.
He lies through his
He added all the Exodus stuff after that, or something like that. Right? Because there's a lot of like reference to Exodus in the film.
Yes.
Yeah, but anyway, I just needed to get that out there because like I think that part of my experience and my coming forward defense of the film is going to be heavily based in this one specific experience where it helped me feel like, even though I had been othered for so long, that I finally felt like at one with something that was like everywhere in the world, that everybody talked about. And
gotcha.
Yeah.
No, that can,
wow.
that's, those experiences are very strong. Like I felt this at Vanilla Sky.
Right. Yeah.
Movies for me. Where I was like, oh, this feels like an expression of something that came out of my head, or like, it felt like very, very connected to it. I have to sort of, I think this movie has like, one of the reasons that I've targeted this film, and I have targeted this movie, like, this is not on accident. This is something that I deliberately picked to start a conversation about camp. But just my argument here as to why I would consider Magnolia a camp movie is, and I'll go back to Sontag's essay on camp, and I'll read a little quote, and then I'll sort of kind of make an argument here.
Go for it.
She says, in naive or pure camp, the essential element is seriousness, a seriousness that fails. Of course, not all seriousness that fails can be redeemed as camp. Only that which has the proper mixture of the exaggerated, the fantastic, the passionate, and the naive. And I think, to me, Magnolia is the paradigm of what she is talking about, in the sense that this movie is extravagant. It is, in a sports metaphor, swinging for the fences. This is PTA trying to make what he says, quote, the ultimate San Fernando Valley, which is an LA movie where he grew up. It's a really almost like a memoir type aspect to it that's going on here. So it's a huge, ambitious attempt. And I think for me, whereas I think with a lot of people see this movie and they're like, oh, this is like a bold statement and it's interesting, it's experimental. I see it as an incredible miss, and a miss on so many different levels that it rises to camp for me. Now I've made my piece, or said my piece. Now I'll let you guys talk and see if, like, am I crazy? Am I like in the total minority here? I don't know. Natasha, does Magnolia work for you as a film overall?
Please go first, Natasha. I'm not about to try to lose a decades-long friendship right now.
Yeah. How did you feel? Do you feel like it landed? Do you feel like it was successful in its mission?
I think so. Uh,
Yeah.
uh,
That's all right.
I
I'm used to
think
being on the losing side.
I think could it have been leaner? I think definitely. I think it could have cut some of the fat. But I think what really I think struck me about the film is I think that balance in I think the more dramatic kind of performances like Tom Cruise and Julianne Moore set in contrast to like Philip Seymour Hoffman's more subtle, grounded performances and Tom, and Riley's performance as well, right? I really like, I think, how all these characters are dealing with their past, right? And I think the idea is that the past is something that, you can't just walk through, right? And think that, you're kind of dealt with it. And it all like culminates in this one moment with the whole like biblical flood of the frogs, right? And in that moment, all the characters just kind of, give in, I think, to their regrets, right? And they kind of let themselves feel, I think, the pathos of their lives, and then I think that allows them to move forward, So I don't know, like I don't think that all the narratives or the threads coalesce very well. But I really love all the parallels that, he kind of draws throughout the film, and it was very, very noticeable with the narrator and also with what the characters experience, like, Stanley's whole lack of agency was kind of parallel to, I think his name is Jimmy's also lack of agency because of his, battle with cancer. The idea that, I don't know, I just really liked how all the stories kind of fit together and how Anderson kind of, you know, like the tracking shots, the cinematography is just really excellent. Like the way he used like music and visuals to kind of track and thread these scenes together. I don't know. It feels like Synecdoche, New York, in a sense that it's this like
Yeah.
it can feel like so bloated and so inflated, and there's so many things happening there, and you don't know if it all works. But I don't know. Much like Synecdoche, New York, I think that Magnolia works in that way. I don't know. Yeah. Do you think? Yeah. Yeah. I think
Thank,
that's my
Chris, what's
thought.
your defense?
thank you for giving me the time to find the New York Times Magazine interview in which Paul Thomas Anderson confirms he was raised Roman Catholic. There's no way he didn't know it was from the Bible.
Yeah, it's like one of the most popular stories.
Right, but I think that kind of proves also the point that Natasha was making, that like the thing that makes this movie work is very unlike so many other films where you have many characters kind of come together, cross paths, or be somehow otherwise divinely interconnected. In that, and I don't know, maybe he's playing 4D chess, or maybe he's just an idiot that knows how to use a camera. But like he is clearly trying to kind of communicate this kind of idea that we absorb things without really like consciously understanding them, and that goes directly to Jimmy Gator's kind of confession, in which he's like, I don't know what I did, but like he knows what he did.
Yeah.
Or when
Yeah.
Earl is dying and he's like, I want to see my kid, and it's like, if you were fully lucid, you would not say that, because you would know who your kid is and what you did to him to contribute to the way he became, and everything else. Like Quiz Kid Donnie Smith is like, wait, why did I do this? I'm such an idiot, when he like tries to steal from Alfred Molina. And so I think there's like so much of this film that can be picked apart in both like a really good way, but also in that other polarizing way. And I think that just kind of adds to its appeal for me, that it becomes I don't think it's camp. I think it has camp elements, like the Julianne Moore monologue at the pharmacy that we introduced the show with. And yet, like, it's that whole idea of like breaking through. That's the purpose of melodrama. And we're going to get into this with our season finale and Douglas Fairbanks and the movies of the 50s, Imitation of Life, where the reason that this became kind of a dramatic trope is because that's how we see truth, is not through the real life suggestions of obfuscation and repression. It is through that kind of over the top, like finally letting the truth out through cinema, through this illusion, through this kind of Machiavellian technology and art form that allows us to manifest that. And I do have to just say, to cap off my defense, it's like Martin Scorsese and Paul Thomas Anderson are still the only filmmakers that make me feel like 3 hours goes by in 90 minutes. And
Yeah.
I don't know. I don't think that there's that this movie would work as well if it was cut down to 2 hours.
Yeah.
I think that there's so much like zip and lightning in it that.
Man, you are a strong defender of
Oh
this
yeah,
film, Chris.
no, I mean, I rewatching this movie for the first time in maybe, but I've watched it a lot, but it's probably the first time in at least 6 or 7 years, and I was a little skeptical. So I'm like, oh my gosh, is this going to ruin Magnolia for me the way that Vanilla Sky was ruined for Dan?
Totally ruined. Yeah.
And I couldn't
Oh,
I couldn't
no.
help myself. I just got sucked right back in. I was like, I cannot wait for the next scene. I cannot wait for the next scene, and.
Yeah.
And I kind of had that like tremble in my heart the same way I remember feeling it at 16 when Claudia says, now that you've met me, would you object to never seeing me again? I just think like that's the other thing about PTA is like he's like fiercely romantic, and that is just like such a beautiful way to say a terrible thing. I can't help myself. It's just
Yeah.
it's candy.
I mean, Chris, I love that you love this movie. I just have to say that, and I love that. I will say that even PTA himself said he should have cut some out of it. He says what he would have told himself is chill the fuck out and cut 20 minutes. That's what he says. Yeah, I mean, I get where you're coming from. I do. And I agree with both of what you're saying. There are some technical aspects to this film that are phenomenal. Some of the acting is some of the best acting you're going to see in the 90s. Like, it's just really, really good stuff.
Oh my
and
God.
even some of the writing is like, wow, this is... I mean, Tom Cruise... I mean, I think we should talk about Tom Cruise's performance because it's like, I think, obviously foundational to the film, right? And I think, and I didn't realize this until I started looking into it, like, very autobiographical to Tom Cruise.
Right.
And there's a lot of parallels here, especially in that scene where he's dying, his father, that are ring true to Tom Cruise's life and PTA's life, as well as there's, you know, it's written in the script a certain way, but Cruise just went for it. And a lot of that, what's actually in the film, was not in the script. It was Cruise clearly playing something out of his own emotional reality, which we never see, by the way.
Right.
Because Tom Cruise has so many different masks on as like a A-list actor. And he is like, I would say, the
So many
perfect
masks
example.
on, Vanilla Sky reference, I guess.
Yeah, exactly. That like we get emotional honesty from Tom Cruise in this movie, which I don't know that we've ever gotten anywhere else in this entire illustrious career. So there's like a lot here that's amazing. You know, I was reading Roger Ebert's review of it, and he goes, Magnolia is the kind of film I instinctively respond to. Leave logic at the door. Do not expect subdued taste and restraint, but instead a kind of operatic ecstasy. There is, to quote Martin Scorsese, a pure cinema element to Magnolia, right? There really is.
Yeah, no denying it.
I think that like, there's no way I could deny that. But I think for me, I have less a problem with the film and more a problem with PTA himself,
Okay.
if I'm being honest. And like what he's trying to, so from an artistic perspective, there's a lot of richness and merit going on here. But like to me, where the weakness comes in and sort of the naivete that really underpins my camp argument is that I think PTA's what he's saying as a writer or as an artist just does not connect with me at all. And I think that like me seeing this movie later in life is the reason that that's the case, because I've seen everything else that he's done.
Yeah.
And you know, what was the last one he did? Licorice Pizza? Is that the last one he did?
Right. Which
you know, like
I feel like I'm the only one in the world that didn't like that one.
Loved it. I thought it was great. Lots of programmatic stuff too. I think it's one of his second best movie.
That's
I think to me it's like, and I'll respond directly to what you said, and then I'll shut up for a bit, because I could literally talk about this movie for like days. Is like, he said that like he's a romantic, and I agree. There's romantic elements to him, but then you watch something like Phantom Thread, and I'm like, this guy's got some like really significant problems that
he works through in cinema. Yes.
Correct. But it's like, and I remember saying this, I was like, I don't need to spend 2 hours with PTA in this therapy session. And I said this like at the Phantom Thread. I was like, I don't need to sit through that. I have my own therapist that I can sit to and talk to. Like, I don't, you know, like, I think that's the thing for me, is that PTA feels like, to me, this is my argument, this is my perspective, he feels like his sort of emotional reality and trials and tribulations are worth putting on screen. And sometimes they're not, right? Sometimes stuff that we go through and we have going on in our lives is not maybe all that relevant or important to other people. And I feel like this is one of those cases, and I would never probably argue that in the past, but like PTA has changed my perspective on that.
Wow.
That maybe that art isn't the dumping place for, you know, emotional distress and emotional struggles. I don't know. Now I'm going off the rails. Natasha, what do you think?
Oh,
How do you say all that and throw it over to the guest? Go ahead, Natasha.
not okay. So I don't know. I don't really know much, I think, about PTA. I just usually I kind of I think it depends on how you look at it, right? Can you separate, I guess, the art from the creator, or you know, do you feel that, you know, you can't separate them at all, right? They have to come, you know, together. Yeah, so I do think that we tend to, I guess, write what we know, I think, as writers, as artists, as people. And I think he gravitates towards these themes, I guess, because they are relevant to him. Could he perhaps make films, I guess, that are more detached, I guess, from his own personal perspective? Perhaps, right? But maybe it wouldn't be as rich. I think there are just some filmmakers, I think, that are like that, right? That they kind of transpose, I think, their emotional landscape onto film. And you know, it's whether, I guess, it depends on whether you like it or not. Yeah, so I tend to, you know, I watch the film and then I judge the film. I don't really, I'm not really like thinking too much, I guess, about the man behind the film, besides the fact that whether it's a good film or not. I don't know. I think for me, when I was watching this film, the quote that kept coming to my mind while watching it is this quote by Philip Larkin, and you know, the quote goes, "In everyone there sleeps a sense of life lived according to love." You know, and I think that's what struck me about all these characters who are just, you know, so desperate, I think, for love and for connection. You know, you see it in the cop character, you see it in, you know, Donnie, right, where he says, you know, I have so much love to give. And I think that that's what kind of struck me about all these characters and their lives, you know, and I guess that's what made it feel so relatable. Yeah, so I don't know. I mean, I felt like I could, I feel like even though the experiences of these characters are not my experiences, you know, like I can't really, like, I guess, truly feel or understand what they're going through, I think at the same time I could really um feel for them, and I think I could empathize or understand in some strange way, even though, you know, their experiences are not mine. So I just love it when film is able, I guess, to do that. I think for me it's just whether or not the entire film comes together to make you think and feel something that you don't usually get, I guess. If it can bring you outside yourself for just, you know, even like 15 minutes, I think the film has succeeded in doing something. So, yeah, I mean, I think that's why I enjoy PTA's work, some films more than others, but yeah, I guess that's my stand on the whole
No,
thing. Yeah.
totally. And the point about him kind of looking back and having some regrets is interesting because that's one of that's yet another kind of like feature of the film. Once again, not a side effect, perhaps, that like which character is it? Is it Donnie also that says like, don't say you never had any regrets? Like, and that's the whole point. The past catches up with you, right? Um,
Yeah,
what?
I think it's when he's speaking to Phil. I think
Yes, yes.
he says that, yeah.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. And I mean,
Yeah.
Philip Seymour Hoffman. Have we not mentioned him? And
Phenomenal.
it's so
Oh,
difficult
so
to watch
great.
any of his movies now. But this
It
is just
is hard. Yeah, it's
um
very hard.
and
Um,
He's
before we
so
throw it
good.
over to trivia to wrap it up, because yes, I could also talk about this movie for days.
hours, yeah.
Um, I really feel like there is something about like these films, because the 90s isn't just like a political landscape, it's also a personal one. And there are films from my youth that I can't watch anymore at all, that I used to just watch on a loop and made me feel alive and engaged and thoughtful. But this is not one of them. And yet there is something about that kind of like youthful egomaniacal energy that he like projects into this movie that, yeah, I totally get it. And I totally respect like how it does not work for you, Dan, because I think that is it's got that fearlessness to it that like it doesn't care if it doesn't work for you. It it cares more about having an effect on you than trying to make you like it.
Yeah, that's a
Um,
very good point. And I would say that, like,
Mhm.
speaking to like what Natasha was saying about, being able to step in a different world of people and experiences that you're not familiar with, and like being connected and having it make you think. I think that's actually like one of the reasons why I have such a strong reaction to this movie,
mhm,
is
mhm.
because like I think mentally and emotionally I'm actually pretty close to PTA. And like, it's
You're
Oh.
looking in a mirror, Dan.
it's kind of like a foil, right? It's like,
Yeah.
here's someone who's
Oh,
probably
wow.
a pretty similar background ish, in terms of class and like where you grew up and stuff to me. And it's like, oh, this is like the path that like I don't want to, it's like one of those things where it's like a path not taken where I'm like, ugh, get
Mhm.
away from me. Get away from the other self. In any event. Okay, let's do some trivia.
Okay. Natasha, here's how this round of trivia is going to work to wrap up the episode. These are 5 other 90s films that have been deemed campy by, it seems like, a general consensus. And I'm going to just try to see if you can guess the title based on a particularly campy quote from the film. And feel free to shout it out, because I know Dan probably won't.
I'm not very good.
But
I'm not very good at all.
I'll happily give extra clues wherever needed. Okay.
Okay.
Best of 5 wins. Number 1, 90s film, camp cinema. I tell you what, kids, it's a odd thing here. Your wrist, far as I can tell, it's fractured in 3 places. You've shattered 2 vertebrae, though I can't be certain without an x-ray. The bone protrusion through the skin, that's not a good sign. Your body temperature is below 80 and your heart stopped beating.
Stop. My boyfriend's dead.
Ooh, good
That's what
guess.
I wanted to say.
Yeah, yeah.
Oh,
I know that
wow.
movie. Is that
I
what that
don't know
movie's
why I
called?
thought.
My Boyfriend's Back.
My
Yeah,
boyfriend's
yeah.
back.
But
Yeah, my boyfriend's
Yeah.
back. Which I
This,
love.
oh, wow. Okay.
yeah, I remember
It's
seeing that one.
good. It's good.
Yeah, it's fun.
It's another. I mean, you got the right idea from the quote. It's characters that are not alive but have attributes that make them seem like they're alive. 1992,
Lord.
starring
Yeah, what else
Goldie
you got?
Hawn.
Oh,
the something she murder. Oh my god! Is it one of Bruce Willis and
Death
Meryl
Becomes
Streep?
Her? Is that it?
Dan got it.
Death
Yes.
Becomes Her.
Damn
Death
it!
Becomes
I
Her.
knew the film, but I couldn't remember the title. God damn it!
Yes.
I've never seen it either. So.
Oh, really? Yeah.
Yeah, it's good. It's so good.
It's a real fun romp. Robert Zemeckis in a rare kind of successful comedic attempt.
Oh, come on.
Okay.
Zemeckis taking shots. Okay.
Yeah, I got to. Okay, next one. Excuse me, the last thing I need right now is some fruit who's just proved himself straight telling my ass how sexy I am.
Birdcage?
Nope, good guess. Definitely, this is also a very gay film.
Okay.
Oh lord.
Actually, also
Okay.
kind of having to do with like trying to determine whether to come out of the closet or not.
Oh, In and Out?
Oh, nope. Let's switch genders, perhaps.
Oh, okay.
Lesbian film.
Wow, I'm lost. I don't
Sorry.
idea at all. This is bad.
You got a year? You got some
Yeah.
cast for us?
99.
Oh.
I'm not going to tell you the lead actress, but I will tell you that an actress that wasn't out at the time was in it, and then she became a prominent gay actress and filmmaker, Clea Duvall.
Oh.
Ooh.
Wait, The Faculty?
Also a pretty gay film.
Pretty good
Wait.
film, yeah.
Oh, wait.
Yeah.
No, the lead actress is Natasha Lyonne.
Oh, it's about cheerleaders.
Yeah. Have you seen
I
this?
forget. I've seen it long time ago.
Yeah.
What's it called again?
Last Chance Natasha?
No, I have no idea.
No, it's
idea.
okay. It's called But I'm a Cheerleader.
Yes, but I'm a cheerleader. Classic. Okay.
Yeah. Also with a RuPaul
Oh, wow.
cameo.
RuPaul.
And a rare appearance by Bud Cort from Harold and Maude. Love that movie. Okay, next. Okay, I got to throw you guys a bone here.
Okay. Give us something easy.
I'm gonna whip through these quotes by the same actor playing the same character in the same film, and you're gonna hopefully get it after the first one or two. If revenge is a dish best served cold, then put on your Sunday finest. It's time to feast.
Clueless?
Surprise, I am your new cellmate, and I'm here to make your life a living hell. Prepare for a bitter harvest. Winter has come at last.
What?
What?
Okay, keep going.
Tonight's forecast, a freeze is coming.
Oh, Batman Robin?
Yeah, there you go. All
Yeah,
Schwarzenegger
Ben
as Mr. Freeze quotes.
Talk about
Lord,
camp,
that
though.
was-
I almost thought about selecting that movie.
I know. I did too. Oh, man.
It's a fun one.
It
Wow.
is. That's
I
one of
was
those ones that,
nowhere
like,
in the
deliberate
realm.
or naive. I think you could do it either way.
It's walking that tightrope over the pit of abyss.
Okay. Okay. Number 4. Let's see here. What the hell is your problem, Christy? Why the hell are you always such a nasty bitch? I mean, okay, so I did make up some stupid lie. We only did it because we wanted you to treat us like human beings. But you know what I realized? I don't care if you like us, because we don't like you. You're a bad person with an ugly heart, and we don't give a flying fuck what you think.
Is it Jawbreakers?
Oh, no, it's very, very closely related. I
I was going to guess that too, Natasha.
Heathers.
I was going to guess that too.
Heathers.
Nope, not Heathers either. This is
Crap.
another long movie title from 97.
97.
2 lead actresses that are really not working much today anymore.
Oh, Romeo and Michelle?
Yeah, there you go.
There you go. Romeo and Michelle High School Reunion?
Yes. Another
Oh
very fun
god.
one.
Yeah.
Which is a fun movie.
It's so much fun.
so fun.
Yeah,
Yeah,
So
it's a
fun.
fun one.
I know. Okay, last but not least, number 5. This one's going to be fun to say. I got to make sure my kids are not nearby. Okay, here we go. Fuck Martha Stewart. Martha Stewart can kiss my shiny plastic butt. Here I am slaving away over a hot stove, making cookies, making Swedish meatballs, and for what? A man who doesn't appreciate me. For a man that can't even wash one fucking dish. For a man who isn't even a man at all where it counts, if you get my drift. Take it from me, honey. Plastic is no substitute for a nice hunk of wood.
Amazing. No idea. No clue.
Wow.
Don't
Why does
overthink
sound
it. It's
so
literally
familiar?
a character made out of plastic.
Character made out of plastic.
Played by Jennifer Tilly.
Not weird
Uh,
science.
It's a
Child's Play?
yeah, which Child's Play?
3?
The one that came out in the 90s.
Two?
Three did come out in the 90s, but no.
Bride of Child's Play.
There you go. Well, what is it called? Bride of.
Child?
Bride of Chucky.
It's just called Bride of Chucky. Yeah.
Oh, Bride of Chucky.
Yeah.
Okay.
Oh my
Okay.
god. No, oh wow. Well, that was very nice of you, Natasha, to give Dan a rare.
My first win.
No, I feel I suck.
No,
I have no
it's-
idea. Oh my god.
I just remember I was just shut in the 90s and basically saw every movie ever in the 1990s. So.
Yeah, in the 90s you were a shut-in. That's right.
Yeah, exactly. Things have changed.
Oh my gosh, Natasha, this was a really fun episode. Thanks so much for joining us on Film Trace.
Well, thanks for having me. Yeah, I'll be better prepared around next time.
I'll prep a study guide for you next episode.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah, Natasha. Do you
Thanks
have
so
any new articles coming out, Natasha?
Yeah,
Soon?
hype some stuff.
Well, I just reviewed Challenges and The Fall Guy, and I think The
Yeah.
Idea of You is coming out soon. I hope. I
Awesome.
think. Yeah.
Wonderful.
Yeah.
So people can find you on Cultured Vultures, right?
CulturedVultures.com. Yeah, and I'm on Rotten Tomatoes as well, so you can find my reviews there. Yep.
Awesome.
Great.
Thanks
Yeah.
again for joining us. We'll be back. Let's see. In a bit, we're going to do Hairspray and Xanadu for the 80s, Rocky Horror Picture Show for the 70s, Day of the Locust for the 70s. So we've got some more Camp Cinema episodes coming up. So appreciate you listening. This has been Film Trace.